Welcome back. I'm Jonathan Fisher. Great to have you once again. Building an effective inbound client acquisition strategy can be one of the most difficult things for any company. It's a deft combination of art and science, almost like a holy grail. Very difficult to find, but extremely powerful if you can get your hands on it. Well, put your explorer's hat on, because today's guest is going to show you exactly where to dig to create your own. Farzad Rashidi he first made a name for himself working as the business development head for Visme, where his strategies attracted 3.5 million monthly organic visitors and gained over 18 million active users for the platform, all within just a few short years. Today, Farzad is the principal and lead innovator at Respona, a powerful outreach platform that helps businesses explode their organic online traffic. And today, he's going to give up the goods, show us exactly how you can build an inbound client acquisition machine. Farzad, fantastic to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, John. I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. So it's quite a story, and if it's okay with you, I'd love to start there. How did you even come about the insights you're going to be sharing with the listener today?
So, John, as you mentioned, I started my career as a first marketing hire at Visme, and over the course of the past few years, we've made our fair share of mistakes and good and bad decisions, and finally figured out the blueprint that really helped us scale our organic traffic and be able to build an inbound engine. And now it's resulted close to around 18 million or so active users. And we basically started Respona as a internal product that was built over on the Visme side, and trying to replicate the same success.
That's fantastic. Well, that journey must have had a lot of ups and downs. A lot of tech startups figuring out the right go-to-market is like, it seems like it's the never-ending problem that needs to be solved. Tell us a little bit more about that, Farzad, if you would.
So, and that's a very important question, John, is that a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today is not necessarily applicable for all types of businesses. And that's one of the first things to understand is the type of product or solution that you're selling, and also the market that you're in. So at the time when I started working at Visme, we basically we're still trying to figure out what was the best way to show up in places where people who were looking for a product like ours would organically come and find us, versus us having to go and chase after customers. Reason being is it's twofold, really. One is understanding whether or not the customers that you're catering to are aware of the problem that you're selling, right? And so basically are selling a solution for. So at the time, Visme, for folks who don't know what it is, it's a presentation and infographic creation tool for businesses. So we knew from day one that folks that are basically running a business, they have to create some sort of visual content on a daily, and they obviously have a need for product that we were selling, and they were aware of it. And so it's not a nice to have type product. And also on the other hand, it was very important for us to figure out an economic way of acquiring customers, because we were at the time, I think, starting at like $15 a month or so, catering to SMBs. And it's a type of product that's built to be affordable, and so doesn't make much economic sense for us to hire a lot of salespeople and go door to door to start selling, right? So basically understanding basically the unit economics of customer acquisition makes sense to rely on either outbound or inbound. And for us, it was quite crystal clear from day one that we had to figure out a way to acquire customers affordably, just because of the price point. Excuse me, Jonathan, it seems like
That's the other thing that's such a big issue for a lot of tech startups, is figuring out the right pricing strategy. I mean, there's entire, Harvard Business Review and Gartner studies on pricing strategy and where you ought to be. And it's interesting how small calibrations, working with the client right now on that, and it's all over the map in their very specific niche. So that's a real issue. Well, Farzad, one of the reasons I'm excited to have you as a guest on the show today is because you've been there, done that. You've actually worked out some of the nuts and bolts and ironed out some of the wrinkles. Can you be really specific for us today and begin to give the listener an outline? How can he or she begin to grapple with these issues and maybe create some similar results in their tech startup?
Sure thing. So when you first answer those two initial questions, right? So one, are my customers aware of the problem that I'm solving? And
Mm.
two, if they're actively looking for a solution for it. Then it means that an inbound engine is most likely your best bet to be able to build a scalable acquisition strategy. So once given that the answer to both of those is a yes, then it becomes a matter of, okay, how does that buyer journey look like? So, Jonathan, say you're looking to create an infographic for this episode, right? And you don't already have a solution that you're looking for. What's the first thing that you do when it comes to starting your research process?
You're going to hit Google, of course, or maybe use something you've already used in the past, or talk to a colleague, or all the above.
Exactly. Yep. Normally, that's true of many industries. That the journey, the research process, that buyer journey normally starts from Google. So understanding that, okay, first of all, we understand that our customers are actively looking for a solution. And we knew from day one that, okay, they're looking for that solution using Google. And it was almost a no brainer that we had to figure out how do we actually get ourselves to start showing up in places where they're looking for. In our case, it was focusing on our search engine optimization on Google. So, regardless of the industry that you're in, understanding where your ideal customers are searching and researching new products or services, and making sure that you show up in places where they're looking for it is step one. So as far as in our case goes, what we had to figure out was, okay, what are some of these phrases? What are some of these keywords that folks were using and searching to in order to come across a product like ours? And very quickly, there's a ton of other platforms like SEMrush or Ahrefs that you can do some keyword research on, and presentation software, infographic software, etc. Were some of the
Sure.
parent keywords that we were looking after. And what we soon realized that, Jonathan, just a quick question for you. Let's say you come across, let's just take our presentation software keyword as an example. How many search results do you think come up in Google when you search a parent keyword like that?
It's got to be
Throw a
a
number.
large number. I don't have a clue of what the number would be, but it's got to be a lot.
1 billion with a B.
Okay,
So
I wasn't wrong,
that's
but I didn't realize how right I was.
that's right.
That is a
So we
lot.
were like,
Wow.
yes. So it's us against a billion other websites. And when it comes to the SEO advice, a lot of folks are like, okay, you need to optimize your website. You need to do keyword research. You need to make sure the site loads fast. You create good content. And basically, we're going to talk about that, all right? And the goal here today is to give a step-by-step instruction to how you go about starting those. But what happened was that I started basically investing a lot of resources, creating those landing pages and blog posts and you name it, any sort of content you can imagine. And after doing all that research, and once we put it up there, guess what happened?
Probably not a lot, because that's David and Goliath right there, man. And I'm not sure you had your five smooth stones just yet.
Exactly. It was absolutely crickets. And
Yeah.
you're 100% right. So we were like, okay, we must have done something wrong here, because as a bootstrap company, obviously resources are always limited. And we went back to the drawing board and understood that, okay, when we are going against a billion websites, even if you're in the top 1% when it comes to quality of content, however way you want to define it, right? So let's say you have the best, fastest, prettiest website in the world. And even if you're in the top 1%, still in the tens of millions, right?
Hmm.
So basically, when we understood, okay, how does this algorithm work? How does Google decide what websites to promote and show in the top search results versus some that get buried? It was a matter of authority and understanding that basically the way Google came about back in the 90s and became popular was by developing this algorithm called PageRank that helps other websites or helps prioritize websites based on their popularity. So if other relevant authoritative websites in your space are constantly mentioning you and talking about you, and normally those are measured in terms of those hyperlinks, which we call backlinks, and pointing to your website. It's almost a vote of popularity in eyes of Google, and other search engines also started following the same type pattern, and it's been the same for over 20 years now. And we're like, okay, that sounds great. We need to start not only doing our keyword research and creating content, we actually need to start reaching out to other folks in our space and incentivize them to collaborate with us in order to get those mentions and basically prove to Google that, hey, we're an authoritative resource, and basically start getting rankings for our target keywords.
So it sounds like, okay, first I've got a question. It sounds like a lot of this is just really good best practices in terms of mastering search engine optimization. But I got to ask you, how did you have the confidence to take this on when you first did your initial research and you realized it was quite that large? Like, did you immediately have some more nuanced ideas that popped into mind, or tell us more about that? I want to dig deeper on that side.
Sure thing. So let's start from the research side first, because a lot of businesses unfortunately make this mistake of, when it comes to SEO in particular, is that they go after like their parent keywords from day one. And that's normally a huge waste of time, because most websites, especially new ones, they don't have nearly enough authority for them to be competitive enough to be able to, basically be placed for those target keywords. So what we have built over the years, and again, this is not something that I sat down one night and came up with, it didn't just occur to me. It was I would say years of trial and error that resulted in this process. But basically, the way we go about our research, and this is something I always recommend businesses to start with, is to first understand, okay, let's just take a keyword like presentations, right? So we know that that's one of the main functions of Visme, and that's one of the things that it does best. And what we started doing was using these tools, like I mentioned, SEMrush or Ahrefs, and run a keyword search, and it gives us a gazillion number of keywords, different ways on how people are basically searching related terms to presentations. For example, how do I make a presentation? Or what are some of the best PowerPoint templates, right? And what we then started doing is to try to basically build a system around prioritizing these, because any company has a limited number of resources. So understanding how do we actually go about, attacking and have a plan of action was extremely important. So built this little formula that I'm going to kind of dissect that a little bit. And I used to call this the Farzad score, and our team didn't accept it. So we ended up with opportunity score. I'm very heartbroken about that. But
we can call it the Farzad score. Come on. I mean, you got the liberty to do that here on Evolve Sales Leader.
Let's call this the Farzad score. I love it.
All right.
So basically what we wanted to do, the goal was, we need to first find keywords that are, one, within our grasp, right? So it's not shooting for the stars here, understanding keywords that are within the range of authoritativeness of our website, and also hit 3 pillars. One, obviously, to get a decent amount of volume. If nobody's looking for that term or phrase, obviously it's pointless. So it has to have some certain level of traffic. At the same time, equally as important, it needs to also have a sense of commercial value, right? So not only that it gets some certain level of traffic, but also it's actually important for the business from a business sense.
Are you talking about it needs to be targeted to your ICP, or tell us more about that if you would?
I'm going to tell you how we are going to quantify each one of these, because these 3 pillars sound pretty subjective, but I've found a pretty good measure or a number that we can assign to each one that's a representative, and we can plug these into a formula that then it will help us basically go through down the list and prioritize thousands of keywords with a press of a button.
So decent volume, commercial value, and your third pillar?
Competitiveness. But that's a reverse metric. We want to prioritize keywords that have lower competitiveness or basically lower competition versus the ones that are higher, right? So ideally, from a mathematical perspective, we need to have keywords that have a decent traffic volume, commercially valuable, and are low in competition, right? So it sounds like too good to be true. But how do we actually go about quantifying them? So we need to assign a number for each one of these keywords so that we can plug them and just multiply them together, right? And get that little Farzad score, as I call it, so that we can sort it as descending on a spreadsheet. And I'm sure other people use a similar type score is not something that I necessarily came up with. This is not rocket science. But what I use normally for the traffic, so basically understanding how much search volume a keyword gets, I don't normally like to look at the traffic volume for the keyword per se, just simply because there are a certain number of keywords that have a feature snippet or have some sort of information that Google gives right away. So it's not something that's going to drive traffic necessarily to the website, even though there are quite a few people who are looking for it. So it's not to say that it's not important, but normally I like to prioritize another metric that works best, and that's what we call traffic potential, and that is the monthly organic traffic of the number one search result for that target keyword. So when we take that, it also takes the secondary keywords that content piece is ranking for as well into consideration. So we're not just looking at the search volume for a particular keyword in isolation, because most likely whenever you're writing content pieces, yes, it has a target keyword, but you're also indirectly including secondary keywords and longer tailed variations of that within the content piece. So taking a look at, okay, who's number one for this keyword and how much traffic they're getting is the number is basically a better metric to assign as the volume for the keyword. Second one is commercial value, and this one is a bit tricky because obviously we have to quantify things, right? So it's not something that we're going to use our best judgment after we have a list, but when you have tens of thousands of keywords, we want to figure out a systematic way of going about it. And the best metric I've found for commercial value is CPC, or cost per click for that keyword, which has nothing to do with SEO necessarily, because cost per click for a keyword is a paid advertisement metric, right? So meaning that what other advertisers are paying on average for a click for that particular keyword. But what this tells me is if other advertisers are willing to pay their good green cash for a click on this keyword, that sends me a signal as an SEO person that this keyword must be commercially more valuable because advertisers like to make money.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
So having that as a metric is extremely helpful, even though we're not running ads here, but it's normally a pretty good metric when it comes to prioritizing based on or assigning a value for that pillar. And last but not least is competitiveness, and that's something that I take from normally one of the SEO tools that we are using, and it's a metric called keyword difficulty, which is looking at how authoritative are those websites on the first page, right? So how many backlinks they have and how authoritative they are. Are they dominated by websites like Apple and Google themselves, or they're smaller websites that we may have a better shot at? So keyword difficulty is normally a score from 0 to 100. The higher, the more competitive the keyword is. And normally we want to take that in reverse, right? So what we do normally is that we multiply that traffic potential by 1 plus cost per click, because the reason why I add a 1 plus in that parentheses is because I don't want to completely ignore keywords that have a 0 cost per click, because that would make the score 0 entirely, and just neutralize that. And then so if they have a cost per click, it's just going to help that score go up. And then multiply by 1 over keyword difficulty, which is a reverse metric, right? So because we want to prioritize keyword to have lower competition, not more. And once you plug that into a little formula on a spreadsheet, doesn't require anything fancy, it's going to give you a very arbitrary score, the opportunity score, as my team calls it. And this is just to help you prioritize. It doesn't mean anything on its own. It could be a random number like 1,203 or something like that. And this is just going to help you sort based on that score and give you a blueprint of where to start, because it makes your life 10 times easier when you have a sorted list of items. And now it's a matter of going through each one and then use your best judgment and figure out, okay, is this keyword really actually relevant for me? But from a mathematical perspective, the ones that end up at the top normally have the highest amount of traffic volume, lowest amount of competition, and highest commercial intent. One last thing I forgot to mention is I normally have a good rule of thumb that I literally had to have a chat with our team the other day, and that is we ignore keywords again, it's a rule of thumb, not that probably most folks are going to disagree with me, but but I found it to be very useful. As a good rule of thumb, I don't go after keywords that have a keyword difficulty of higher than my domain authority. What that means is don't go and shoot for the stars. If you have a website that's new or low in authority, don't go after keywords that are super competitive just because you have a much lower chance of being able to be one of the top 10 search results for that. So starting from some of the longer tail variation keywords normally have lower volume or less commercial intent, and then kind of working your way up over time is key to start getting some traffic trickle in. And then over time, you'll be able, as your website grows in authority, which we're going to talk about here in a second, then you'll be able to go after some of the more keywords that are more competitive.
Well, let's take that as our segue because, having really, really good targeted strategy in place, as you're talking about, it's got to be plugged into a content strategy to match up with that and create the results. Talk to us about how you bring the two together. How do you build a masterful content strategy around this?
So another thing is also, we're talking about Google today, and it's not necessarily that the stuff I'm talking about is, I'm not advocating for Google as the main search engine. If you're selling different types of products or companies that offer some sort of services that are normally purchased elsewhere, like for example, if you're an e-commerce store, you're probably going to look at Amazon as your predominant or as the main search engine, or other sort of businesses that may be selling through other channels. The principles we're talking about today is applicable to other search engines, and obviously you got to modify it based on the type of business that you have. So having that content strategy basically you don't necessarily want to look at it necessarily as a pure Google play, but you can replicate it also for YouTube, for Amazon, for all the other search engines. So wherever your customers are hanging out, you go through the same process for the target keywords and that they're searching through those search engines.
Well, and there's a certain theory that the digital world does reflect something about the real world, right? I mean, the activity is being conducted by humans who are interested in a certain outcome, so it makes sense that will correlate across platforms. Real quick reminder to our live audience, we are going to get to some Q&A here in just a few short minutes. Don't wait. Go ahead and post your questions in chat, and at the half hour, we're going to revert over into Q&A and get some real-time answers from our expert, and you can walk away with even more golden gems in that way. So Farzad, a really good content strategy is where we're blowing through our time here today. Good stuff. Very detailed, actionable stuff. Can you give us some good principles about building more authority that are across platform and just overall content strategy methodologies you have found to be very effective?
So that's really the main point, Jonathan. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we did all of this at the beginning with Visme, and it was still crickets. It's not to say that you just follow all the best practices and all of a sudden folks are going to queue up and start coming to you. So the missing piece normally in any of these strategies, and again, when you go and start working with SEO agencies, normally that's all they're focused on, because these are stuff that's under our control, right? Everybody can pull up a spreadsheet and start doing some keyword research and run a few tools and start writing content, right? And as humans, we like that because it's under our control. We can start typing words and then put it on our website. But that's one side of the coin. That's a piece of the puzzle. The biggest piece is that once you have these really good content pieces that you created and you've done proper research to understand what to create in the first place, it is how do we actually get it up in the search results, right? And this is true of pretty much all sorts of search engines. And as I referred to at the very beginning, it's a matter of understanding how the algorithms work. And algorithms rely on authority, right? They want to promote stuff that they believe to be true, right? And provide you with higher quality search results. And that's how they cater to the users. So we need to understand, okay, what do they define as authoritativeness? And as I mentioned, it's a matter of popularity, because that's a very difficult thing to fake, right? Because you can create user-generated content. You can get AI to write you pieces of content, but you can't get Jonathan to start talking about Respona automatically. It's a very difficult thing to do. You need to know what you're doing, right? And having that vouch, right? That vote of popularity is extremely important. So how do we actually go about getting these, right? Because it's easier on paper normally, and easier said than done. And
Yeah.
that's sort of where Respona came to be actually as a product out of Visme. And we're going to dig into that here in a second. But what we ended up doing is anytime we put out a new piece of content and or landing page or a new feature or any sort of basically update that we have, we normally start going after other relevant authoritative publications in our space and to start a collaboration with them. Let me give you some examples. Again, I like to keep things pretty practical, Jonathan, and I'm sure the audience would appreciate it.
Yeah.
One of the best ways to do it is what I'm doing right now. That's podcasts. And a lot of people don't think about it as an SEO strategy at all. And it's true to an extent, but not to say this is the only reason why I'm here today. Obviously, there's myriad of benefits to going on events as a speaker. One, first and foremost, is meeting smart people like yourself, Jonathan, and making great connections. But also, when Jonathan's talking about Respona, you're going to put this podcast episode on a little web page, and inevitably you gotta have to mention Respona, right? And maybe link to our website, and you're not even thinking about this, but you're sending a signal to all the search engines that, hey, Farzad from Respona, or somebody that I'm vouching for. And when you turn that into a process, when you do this every week, so I know I was on about 50 podcasts last year, and when that becomes systematic, that becomes a really, really nice engine to be able to kind of first get free advertising to a niche audience, and also at the same time, you are helping the podcaster and the host to create a piece of content, and at the same time, you're getting these vouchers through search engines. And this is one out of a gazillion different strategies that we normally do, but this is one of the simplest ones that we implement, and I always recommend, especially founders or other companies, to start undertaking because it doesn't require that much time, and it's a mutually beneficial collaboration, and that's at the end of the day what matters. Because when it comes to building relationship with people, you add value, you get value, right? So I'm helping you, Jonathan, to create this episode by providing content, and at the same time, you're helping us promote the word and get the word out about Respona.
Well, I like that too, because you're actually leveraging your connections in a way that's very powerful for all parties. It's an all ships rise theory. And it makes me wonder if podcasts are almost like today's PR. Because you used to be able to get a lot more pull from PR back in the day. Today, it's kind of a formality. I mean, a lot of companies still do it, but I don't know how much how much legs there are. That's not the right way to say it. I'm not sure how much leverage that gives you to do old school PR, but hey, sharing audiences with each other is a great way to rise together. And you're also kind of leveraging social proof, to use more of a sales terminology, right? That we all tend to buy in. If someone else already has our trust and respect and they're making a recommendation, it's far more powerful than any search result, you might say.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. And that's not to say that this is the only way to get the word out. There's a number of different strategies that goes into building authority and content promotion. And I actually like to direct folks to a free resource that we have on our website, and it's a completely ungated thing. It's not a lead magnet for us, but just for the sake of time, since we're getting close, I didn't get to chat a bit more about some of the other strategies. I like to direct folks to Respona.com, and at the bottom of the page, we have this outreach strategy hub that basically gives you ready to use recipes and templates that most of which you can replicate by yourself, right? Manual outreach doesn't require any fancy tools, including Respona. And you'll be able to start putting it into place. So start getting some mentions of backlinks. And when you hit a point that it becomes quite time consuming, then obviously tools like Respona would help kind of streamline some of that processes. But that resource, I think, is a good place to start when it comes to figuring out some of these promotion tactics, just like the podcast outreach, as I mentioned.
Well, Farzad, you're a sharp guy. You did my job for me, but I'm grateful of doing that little kind segue into how folks can take the conversation deeper. So I want to add my recommendation as well. Listener, go ahead and check out Respona.com, which is just Respona.com. Bottom of the page, there's a great free resource there. And just a brief word on what Respona does there, Farzad. How do you guys help companies do some of the things we've been talking about today?
So, Jonathan, Respona was born actually as an internal software that we built at Visme to help streamline all of these outreach tactics that helped us with building authority for our website. And basically what it helps what it helped us do was to automate a lot of this research process and mundane tasks so that we can spend more time on personalization and actually building relationships. So what Respona does, anytime you produce a new piece of content, anytime you have a new feature, it will help you identify the right websites to contact, the correct content pieces that you need to contact, finds the right person who's in charge of that website, who's a content manager, and then it gives you a way to contact them via email and LinkedIn to get in front of them, much like outbound, right, for sales. But it's the goal here is completely different. We're not trying to sell someone something, where we're trying to start a collaboration and start that relationship. But it kind of brings the whole process under one roof and makes it very easy to follow, right? It's a step-by-step process that you can go through from start to finish in 10 to 15 minutes. And that just saves a lot of time. And it also incentivizes the team to do this on a regular basis and not just rely on these tactics as a one-off, and do this every single week. Anytime there's a new piece, there's a new feature, or there's a new product that comes out, and they'll be able to replicate that within a matter of a few minutes.
Well, love it. Well, if you want to take today's conversation and really apply it, sounds like Respona is the perfect tool to use. It's a tool that you actually built to implement these strategies for yourself. Love it. Well, it's time for us to jump into our live Q&A. We do have some questions from our awesome audience here. And let's begin with, we have a very specific niche who's curious. Let's see. I'm going to go with Oshawa Hunt. Is asking the following question: would this method be beneficial to employment agencies looking for clients?
So Shawa, what I would suggest here, so I'm not, it's a little vague for me to be able to, but I'm gonna do my best to tackle this. And I think that also simultaneously answers Levy's question as well.
Well, yeah,
Levy,
that's exactly. Levy was asking, are there companies who would not benefit from an inbound plan like this one? Great question.
So they're sort of correlated. So let me tackle both at the same time. Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is not the right fit for all sorts of companies. So let me go through a couple of examples. So let's say you sell a T-shirt company, or you sell button-up shirts, or some sort of lifestyle product. You run an e-commerce store. The way people, just think about the last time you bought a shirt. Did you actually go on Google and look up shirts for men? Very unlikely, right? You might have, but normally the way people purchase things is that they see it somewhere, they go to the store, they purchase it, or they go to their favorite brands, right? So normally your best bet is to start getting Instagram models and TikTokers to start, wearing your shirt and promoting it. Maybe run some Facebook ads, right? So that sort of product, I would suggest kind of investing your resources on social media channels, places where, because I don't constantly think about, purchasing a shirt and then go on Google and start searching for it. So an inbound channel there may not be necessarily the right fit. On the other hand, let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Let's say you sell hospital equipment, right? And each one costs $100K plus. Or there are some enterprise SaaS companies that sell similar price range products that are software products, but they sell to a very specific niche within an enterprise. Normally, people who work in a hospital aren't Googling, hey, where can I buy an MRI machine, right? That's silly. So the buyer journey for that and the sales cycles are completely different. So for that type of product, it makes more sense to follow an ABM strategy, right? Have a list of target accounts, follow some, hire some SDRs, have some AEs, let the SDRs go door to door, start knocking on door, and get them in front of an AE and close. So that type of product, that type of service is completely different from what I was advocating for here. And today, what I mentioned and the processes that I talked about are again, going back to that two questions. one, are your customers aware of the problem that you're solving? And two, if so, how are they looking for it? And if the answer is yes, they're aware of the problem and they're currently looking for it through Google, then the strategies that I provided for you make sense.
Would you say there's also sort of a function of average transaction value and overall addressable market? If those numbers are high and low, respectively, maybe you should stick with more of an ABM approach as opposed to building an inbound engine. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. So normally it depends on the company's, I would say, strategy as well. So there are certain products or companies that, even though they sell very expensive software, for example, that's kind of the industry I'm in. So that's one of the first examples that come to my mind. Let's say if you have a freemium engine or something that basically you can get folks in through the PLG method and turn them through to your inbound channels to raise their hand and actually become a sales qualified lead. There's a number of companies that do this, like GitLab and companies that basically have a very low barrier to entry, and basically upsell to enterprise customers that way. So that's one thing that comes to mind. And also on the other hand, um, they're not mutually exclusive from each other, inbound and outbound. For example, on the Visme side, we're now at a point that we just hired our first VP of sales, and we have a small sales team, and we're actually going after enterprises and doing outbound and doing all the good old stuff that I basically mentioned earlier.
Nice.
And so we started from product led, and now we're hitting a point that is quite mature. That engine is running itself, and it's not something I would recommend you to do both at the same time. Just especially when you're just starting out, just because resources are normally quite limited. But at some point, in my opinion, all sorts of companies that start with either sales led or product led, they have to have a little bit of mix of both to be able to really take it to that next level. And obviously there are exceptions to this. It's not the right fit for all sorts of companies. But I think even if you're starting from inbound and product led motion, at some point, once you hit that like 10 million year plus, that's what I've seen, especially in the software SaaS space. You normally want to start dipping into outbound and sales led motion and get that running as well.
That makes sense. Great question from Shannon here. He's asking, he's making a comment, but I think there's a question inherent in it. The first step is create a sales and marketing collaborative culture within our teams. And, it is amazing just how often those two departments are still very siloed off from each other. Would you talk to us a bit about this issue, Farzad?
Jonathan, wish I could provide more value here, but it's something that we struggle with ourselves, right? So we're still in the learning phase. And again, I don't mean to pretend I'm a know-it-all. And there are quite a few folks that are very experienced that we're getting advice on. And at the end of the day, I feel like we're kind of moving away from this traditional notion that marketing brings leads and then sales converts. I think those two departments are kind of merging and working hand in hand, especially nowadays that there's so much noise in the market. The companies need to be, at 110% of their capacity to be able to attract customers. And that is a big challenge, I must admit. And this is something that we're still dealing with ourselves too.
Well, I'm going to disagree with one thing you said. I think you just added some value, but yeah, it's a struggle, and I
Thanks.
appreciate you being disclosive of that. It is interesting. I mean, it takes quite a focus to make sure all the interests are aligned, from job description to properly incentivizing. And we've had other fantastic guests in the show who have shared about that. But that's definitely a really great point there, Shannon. Thanks for your comment. Another one that was really interesting I wanted to put up here, and we'll probably close it out with this one. Bill Harper is commenting. He loves that we're talking about the need to define an appropriate message to begin with. And too many businesses just throw stuff at the wall, try to A/B test their way to some measure of success. He's calling that a model of inefficiency. Would you comment on Bill's comment?
Right. So, I agree and disagree at the same time. I think that having some, you know, I myself am guilty of this. I'm kind of attracted to the shiny objects in a way, growth hacking and all sorts of new tactics that are becoming popular nowadays. And obviously, understanding your target market, the type of product they serve, and also sticking to a couple of strategies so you're not spreading yourself too thin is important. But at the same time, you don't know whether channel is truly going to work or not until you actually have some experimentation done. And obviously, it's not to say, hey, you should just experiment with all channels and figure out you should be on TikTok and you should do ABM and you should do all sorts of things at the same time. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to keep an open mind to new channels and the way that the market is evolving, because the way consumers now purchase is also changing with the way folks find information. There's now Chat GPT, and the way people are finding information is also evolving. So that is something that I feel like is something to keep in mind as you are building your customer acquisition strategy.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say as a good marketer at heart is there's always got to be some room to sandbox some ideas, right? There's some things that are not going to be knowable a priori. No matter how good your hunch is, it's got to be tested. Your hunch that you thought was awesome might stink, and something you thought was outlandish turns out to be a winner. And it's a great reminder to everybody who is a marketing geek, like those of us on this show, business development geeks. That is something that is a good reminder to end on. Farzad, thanks so much for adding an amazing amount of value to our audience. You've been a fantastic guest. You're welcome back anytime, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, Jonathan. This was fun.
Well, and if you've been enjoying the value of our show and the guests that are here, don't forget you can go check them out anytime you like at the Evolve Sales Leader podcast. Every podcast begins life as a live stream right here with our LinkedIn audience, but it's always there for you. Go check it out next time you need to work out and want to add value to the time spent or drive time, what have you. And we also want to thank our sponsor, Overpass.com. If you need to grow a team of SDRs, AEs, full cycle sales professionals at an amazing value and a very high level of skill, go check out Overpass.com. Hiring managers can open an account for free, and you get a free account executive to help you locate fantastic talent. You can hire people in days at very low cost. It normally would take you weeks. Check them out at Overpass.com. Once again, I want to thank everybody for being here for the Evolve Sales Leader. That's going to do it for this time. We'll see you next time, same station. See you then. Take care, everybody.